Welcome, everybody, to the Keeping the Nostalgia Live show. I am your host, Billy Powell. You're watching this probably on our YouTube channel, the Keeping the Nostalgia Live show. Please subscribe to it. And also head on over when you get a chance to Keeping the Nostalgia Live. That's all one word, Keeping the Nostalgia Live.podbean.com. And we've got over 200 interviews with the likes of Rick Mount, Kent Benson, Coach Gene Cady, those who played, officiated, coached, or just had a passion for the game. You'll find a lot of interviews over there. So download and listen at your convenience. Ed Hackney joins us again today. He was nice enough to join us with Chip Ritter last week. And this week, Ed gets to talk.
Well, I've been known to do that.
So being from the state of Indiana, playing for the Madison Cubs, playing for Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame coach Bud Ritter. Before I came on, I was doing a little research. I'm lying. I did this last week. But 6 degrees of separation is most of my guests on the show. And of course, Bud Ritter played for Evansville Bossy. And that is probably one of the reasons why there's not two Indiana high school state championships at Broderpool that used to hang in the rafters. There's only one because Bud Ritter was on one of those Bossy teams that beat Broderpool in the 1945 state championship.
Okay, so, there you go.
Ed, thank you so much for joining us. Let's talk a little Madison Cubs, Coach Bud Ritter, game of basketball growing up Indiana.
My pleasure. I guess the first thing I'll start with is I was in the 6th grade. And there was a lady who owned a grocery store named Inez Holcroft, and she owned a grocery store called Holcroft's Grocery. And she was a huge basketball fan. And my job was a stock boy, putting on cans on the groceries and putting 65-cent stickers with the ink pen or whatever, the stamp with the ink on it. And one of her friends took me to a Madison Cub game when I was in the 6th grade, and I got to see walked into the gym with 5,500 people in a town of 12,000, and the place is full and it's exciting, and the band is playing and the students are screaming and the boys cheer blocks going, rip them up, tear them up, give them hell Cubs right before the jump ball. And I thought, man, how cool would it be to be able to come here and play basketball? And then later on that year, I got to play. They had us come and play at halftime. During as a 6th grader, we got to play at halftime as the Eggleston Little League team. Got to play at halftime for one of the games. And so I got to 2 games that year, and then I was addicted. What a great thrill to be able to go in as a basketball player and have 5,000 people every night cheering you on and rooting for you, and the band playing. And it was just like a magic moment to be able to, the energy that you got from a crowd like that in a small town of Madison, Indiana.
Brothers, sisters, were your mom and dad athletic?
No, not really. I'm sorry. Hold on a minute.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
Can you still see me? Because I'm somehow or another, I got screwed up here. Now I got to get back to where I was on my, there it is.
There we are.
Yeah, I have a brother, Bruce, who's a year younger than me. He graduated in 74. He was all conference in the Hoosier Hills Conference. I have a sister that's a pretty good tennis player, Vanessa, a year after me. And then I have 2 other sisters that were not particularly athletic, but there were 5 of us growing up in Madison. And my dad was a huge sports fan, but never played. And my mom had no idea about anything except that I was playing. And that was good enough. They came to every game.
Did you guys have a hoop at the house?
No, I didn't. We didn't have much of a yard. The yard was about the size of this bedroom, actually, but I lived a block and a half from Eggleston Elementary School, which had a huge playground and basketball goal and kids and competition, and that's where everybody played in downtown Madison back in the day in the late mid 60s, late 60s. So I'd go up there and hang out, and every once in a while they'd only have 9 guys and they need a 10th, so I could go out and get to play, and I'd get to shoot a little bit as a 6th grader and a 5th grader playing against the big guys as a grade schooler. I get to play against those guys, so it was pretty cool, actually.
Was basketball your first love, or were you introduced to basketball first? Do you remember baseball first? Was football a big thing in the area at the time?
we had football, but not, that was, it was about 14th on the scale of priorities at our high school. But basketball was good, but I was actually wanted to be a baseball player. I was a pitcher, and I wasn't even going to play high school basketball as a freshman. I didn't go out for the team until 2 weeks before the season started. And then a guy named Tom Chilton talked to me. He said, you know, you're 6 foot tall as a freshman and you're a pretty good player, and you're only in high school once. But I was going to be a Major League Baseball pitcher. I had it all figured out. And I learned a valuable lesson. If you want to know how to make God laugh, just tell him your plans. Okay. So I ended up going out as a freshman and made the junior varsity, played for Gary O'Neill on the JV team as a freshman, and then got to play for Bud and Ed Orrell and as a sophomore, junior, and senior year. And I played baseball all 4 years as a varsity pitcher. So got to play for Ed Orrell, coaches in baseball.
You know, another thing I don't ask God for is patience, because don't ever ask for patience.
No, don't.
So as a kid, as you know, before, you know, heading off to elementary school or even Madison, what was did you have, you know, geography makes us the fans of the teams that we end up loving. You know, like I was born and raised in Indianapolis. Of course, Indianapolis Indians were the AAA ball club for the Cincinnati Reds for years. So I was a big Red Machine, Cincinnati Red baseball fan. Growing up where you grew up, was it who you listened to on the radio, who you got to see on TV? Who were some of your favorite baseball teams?
Well, the Reds were the big Red Machine back then, right? And so that you had to love the Reds. And Johnny Bench, my dad took us to a game when I was in the 6th grade. We got to go see the Reds play, and I think it was Johnny Bench's rookie year. And I watched this guy take infield, and his catcher threw the ball like on a string all the way down to second base, and just like a boom. And I was like, oh my gosh. So we always had to get there early to watch Johnny Bench take infield, just to throw the ball around. And we had a great time. Smell of the peanuts in the parking lot, and the Cracker Jack, and the cold beer here sayings at all the crowd. You know, it was just awesome. Then when they moved to Riverfront Stadium, like 71, I guess it was. And it wasn't ever the same, but we went down, and my dad would order tickets through Rogers Drugstore, and we'd get front row tickets often, because if you order them, they were his tickets, and he'd just sell us those tickets in advance. So we had a great time going up and watching the Reds play. Then my dad was a big UK fan, basketball fan. And so there was an announcer at WHAS named Kaywood Ledford down in Louisville, and he would broadcast the games. And he was a big homer for UK. I mean, big time homer. Kentucky never got the call right. They always got robbed on every single call that I remember. But my dad would turn on the television, and instead of listening to Joe Dean talk about string music on the Jefferson Pilot TV network, he'd turn the sound down and watch the game and have Kaywood Ledford broadcast it for him. So I got to be exposed to that. And then in high school, back in the day, Channel 4 out in Indianapolis, WTTV, they'd broadcast Notre Dame games, they'd broadcast IU games, they'd broadcast Purdue games and Pacer games. So literally they were practically ESPN before ESPN came along in the early 70s, broadcasting all their games. And I used to watch Rick Mount, and he would go down in the corner and he'd shoot that jumper on and he'd drift out of bounds and watch it go in, right? And I remember when I got to play against Purdue at Mackey Arena, I was at DePaul University, and we went up there to play. And the first time I got the balls on the right wing, and I went down in the corner and I jumped in the air and I shot my corner and I drifted it out of bounds. And I met Rick Mount at a Hall of Fame thing when Tom Chilton and Buster Bradley got inducted, and Jack Waters, those guys got inducted. And I went up to Rick and I said, Rick, I got to tell you, I loved watching you play. In fact, I copied my jump shot after Rick Mount, which is a pretty good guy to copy after, right? And I said, and I watched you shoot that shot. He goes, yeah, that was my TV shot. I said, I know. I watch it on TV all the time. And I told him I went down in the corner. First time I got to play there, and I go down and I shoot that shot in the corner, and I drifted out of bounds. He said, did you make it? I said, well, of course I made it. Would I brought this story up if I didn't make it? So he said, yes. Now, what's funny is my daughter was Miss Basketball in the state of Ohio in 2009. her name's Kendall Hackney. And I'm actually best known for my athletic prowess of being Kendall's dad, to be honest with you. But she played at Northwestern. So I got to go up there and watch her play 4 years at Purdue on that court. And it was a great thrill to be able to see her play, and seeing her play the Big Ten championships. And what's it called now? It used to be called something Fieldhouse. What's the name of the stadium down there? Basketball arena in Indianapolis, where the Pacers play.
Banker's Life.
Yeah, Banker's Life. Yeah, it used to be called Conseco. That's what it was. So she got to play at Banker's Life, I think 3 out of the 4 years. So it was really cool to be able to be part of that, and the legend of Indiana basketball and stuff like that.
And for us old folks, it used to be Market Square Arena. Yes,
MSA. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Now, what's interesting, I was going to get to it a little bit later. Previous to us starting the show, you showed us a picture of that you had sent to everybody, and autographed. Larry Humes is in it and all that. I would like you to show that picture to everybody, but also, and I only bring this up now because you know, I don't think Rick Mount had any assists when he was in college either. And you were talking about someone who never passed the ball also, that is in this photo. Please share it with those that are watching.
So this is a picture of Larry Humes, who was Mr. Basketball in 1962. Larry Shingleton, who was an Indiana All-Star, I think in 58, might have been 59, but somewhere in that era. Then that's me. Then this is Harold Pee Wee Lakeman, who played, I think he graduated in 59. And this is Buster Briley. And then on the end is Jack Waters. And Jack was an All-American down at Ole Miss, and Buster was an All-American at Evansville and scored like 1,400 points. And of course, Larry was also an All-American and 2-time national champion down at Evansville. The Buster and those guys they all played with Jerry Sloan down there, and had a great run. Well, we're laughing in that picture because Pee Wee had just made a comment about Buster never passing the ball, right? And I heard Rick Mount be interviewed once on television. He was being interviewed on television about whether he should shoot it or somebody else shot it. And he thought, well, if you're open and I'm open, I'm probably going to shoot it because I'm probably a better shooter than you were. So he kind of had a point there. And look, I don't care what anybody says. I never took a shot without the ball when I was playing. Okay. Just never took a shot unless I had the ball. So just establish that right away.
Man, my brain hurts. I got to think about that one. So, you know, where the Madison Cubs play, you were telling us about, you know, being there and going, man, this is fantastic. I want to play here when I'm in high school. What was, you know, the smell of the popcorn? Could you still walk in that place today and know where you were with being blindfolded?
It's the same gym. Yeah. Yeah. It's the same high school, Connor K. Somm Gymnasium in Madison High School. It's on the hilltop. I have spent thousands of hours shooting jump shots in that place, working on my stroke and practicing and playing. I'd play 1-on-0. I'd dribble length of the court and play myself full court for hours as part of the conditioning and shooting and running and working on your game. And it was a lot of time, a lot of fun doing that.
What college basketball teams did you follow? Or like, I know we do Purdue, but what, you know, was there, you know, of course, I take it, were you forced to be a Kentucky Wildcat fan?
Well, no, I actually did like Kentucky because Mike Flynn, who was Mr. Basketball my sophomore year from Jeffersonville, went down there and played. And I got to play against him. And I got to play against him in some summer pickup leagues a couple times. And so I followed Kentucky because they had Kevin Greavy and Mike Flynn and Rick Roby, and had, you know, really good teams and they were fun to watch. And of course, Steve Green, I played against him as a sophomore, who was an All-American for Bobby Knight at IU. So I followed those guys. And you followed Notre Dame because they had a great team with Austin Carr, John Shoemate, and those guys. And it was just a great time to be a basketball fan. So I really probably rooted for Kentucky, but I also rooted for IU, and I was a Purdue fan as well. And I'm just a fan of the game. I don't really have a team anymore that I root for per se, but I just like in baseball and basketball, I'm just a great fan of the game, and I usually root for whoever's got the ball. Except I'm a huge Northwestern fan because my daughter played basketball there, and those guys are we got to know all those guys pretty well over the years at Northwestern. So we root for them in football and basketball. Great people.
Since I've been doing this, it was pounded in my head when I was a kid because my uncle was such a big Indiana University and Bobby Knight fan that, there was no other school that compared to Indiana University. But, since I've been doing this, and of course, as I've grown older, you appreciate just the game of basketball and of course, baseball too. But you just appreciate the game no matter, and you root for all of those, that especially in the colleges in the state of India, because they may be the one that end up representing the state in a Final Four, Sweet 16, Elite Eight, or whatever.
Well, and that's just it. In the Midwest, think about it. You had Louisville, you had Kentucky, you had IU, you had Cincinnati, you had Xavier, Purdue, Notre Dame, Cincinnati, Ohio State. There are a lot of great basketball played in the Midwest over the years. Indiana State, Larry Bird, and those guys, right? So it was just a lot of great teams to watch play back then.
So once you're, on that freshman basketball team, did you have any idea of what you're getting into or what memories you were going to continue to have so far down the road?
I don't think you think about that as a freshman. You're just worried about, getting to playing time and working on your game. And there was a guy as a freshman, the best player on our varsity team was a guy named Gary Mauser. And Gary was about a 6'3" guard, strong, tough as nails, really great player. And I remember thinking as a freshman, man, if I could ever be as good as Gary Mauser, I would be a tremendous player. And he played down at Northwood Institute and went to college down there. And I just thought, man, if I could, I'm going to work as hard as try to be as good as Gary Mauser. And Gary was a tremendous player, and he's a good friend even now, and loved watching him play. And then as a sophomore, I got on the varsity, and was fortunate enough to make the varsity. And our best player was a guy named Bobby Wilson, and the other guy was a guy named Junior Keaton. And I remember thinking, man, if I could be as good as Bobby Wilson or Junior Keaton, I'd be a pretty good player. And I grew a lot taller and got a lot stronger and worked on my game. And fortunately, come in my junior year and senior year, we had a lot of success and able to score a few points and got to play in college. And I remember going back to playing against Bobby and Junior once after I was in college, came back after my freshman year playing against them down at Crystal Beach where everybody played, and thinking, I made it. I made it. So it was a lot of fun.
What was the tradition or the history of the game at Madison before you got there, before Coach Ritter got there? Tell us a little bit about that.
We had some great teams in the 40s. I think they lost in the state championship game in 1941 to Washington. And there was a guy named Bill Lodge, who was an All-American, I believe, at Purdue, was a great player. And a guy named Don Server, whose son Beaver was a tremendous friend of ours and played at Southwestern, beat us in the sectional my senior year, unfortunately. But they had great players back then. And in 1950, in 1949, Madison was runner-up in the state championship game, lost to Jasper, I believe it was. And Dee Monroe was Mr. Basketball, who was my next-door neighbor growing up in downtown Madison on 4th Street, which I didn't know that until many years later, that he was my next-door neighbor. And Ed Orrell was on that team, and he went to William and Mary and played, and he became our assistant coach and eventually transferred back to Hanover and had a great career as a Hanover baseball and basketball player. And one of the guys that I have he's my hero of all time, is Ed Orrell. Just get that in there right now. So Mr. Orrell's my favorite person of all time, and the guy that if he called today and said, Ed, I want you to run through that brick wall, I wouldn't hesitate. I'd run through the brick wall because he asked me to. That'd be all I needed to know, right? And then in 1950, the year after that, they won the state championship. And there was a guy named Spence Schneider who recently died after all these years. Spence went to play at Yale. He was an Indiana All-Star. And Ray Green, Steve Green's dad, was on that 1949 team. and he was a big guy and a tall player and a very good player. And there was a guy named Andy Taft in the 50s who, or late 40s, I think, was also a great player from Madison. He was Michael Jordan back then, hanging in the air and doing stuff that nobody'd ever seen done before. And then in the 60s, in the 50s, Madison Bud came in. So they won the state. Ray Eddy was the coach, and he became the athletic director at Purdue, where he was the backcourt to Johnny Wooden in 1932 on that team, right? So he had a great legacy of basketball. And in fact, my father-in-law played for Ray Eddy in 1944 and 45, and he left the middle of Christmas of his season to go his senior year to go into the war, to go in the Air Force. So there was a great legacy of that. And then Bud comes along in the 50s and starts, the whole thing with the Humes brothers, and then Buster Briley and Larry Shingleton and Donnie Firth, who played at Houston. They had some great players come along through there. And then you just grew up, Madison, Indiana. You just knew when you came down there to play, you're going to have your hands full. And the fans were great. Everybody in town was a big basketball fan. And the merchants would decorate the windows on all the main streets. They'd paint Cubs or Go Cubs, and the fans would go nuts. I know when we played in Seymour in the regional my junior year, the boys cheer block dribbled a basketball all the way from Madison to Seymour on the day of the game on Friday afternoon. I mean, think about that. That's like, I don't know, 40 miles maybe. So they took turns and they dribbled that basketball. And then when they got there, they came in with a polka dot. We had polka dot uniforms, which I think you have a picture of somewhere. White basketball with red and blue polka dots painted on it. And they came in the door with that and handed it to us. And we shot our layup line with that basketball that they brought with them from that time. So there was a lot of community involvement, a lot of community spirit back then.
The stories can't be remembered if they're not told. And this is why I do this. And I know Ray Eddy was, if I'm not mistaken, Coach Dave Shellhouse's coach at Purdue.
I think so also. Too. I think so. Yeah.
I mean, one of my favorite places to go was, back then it was Butler Fieldhouse, and they changed it to, once Tony Hinkle retired, they changed it to Hinkle Fieldhouse. Yeah, right. And just like I asked you that question about, I know your gym is still there, but, even to this day, last August, when I went to Hinkle Fieldhouse, you could have put a blindfold on me and walked me in the door, and I could have smelled that it was Hinkle Fieldhouse.
Yeah, I got to play there my freshman year of college at DePaul. We were in the same conference with Butler. So it was Butler and Evansville and Valpo and St. Joe's and us, and I forget who else it was. But I walk into the gym, and it was like a religious experience, right? I mean, I just stood there and held my breath and looked around, and I thought of all the great moments in basketball history that Indiana had experienced in that facility, and the Hoosiers and Bobby Plump hitting the jumper. The memories. You could just stand there and just hear the echoes, and you could hear the laughter in the walls of that gym from being part of the legacy of Indiana basketball. And I got to play that game, and I remember I came down, I hit 3 straight jumpers from the head of the circle, and their coach called a timeout. And this was in 73, 74 season. And when I turned around to come out of our huddle, the guy's standing there waiting for me. And I said, "What's going on?" He goes, "Coach told me to get over here and guard you out of the huddle. So you're not getting any more shots." Well, I did get a few more shots, but not that next time down the court. But I'd hit 3 in a row from the head of the circle, and they called a timeout and stopped it. But so I got to, not only did I get to walk through there, but I got to play there and hit a few shots. And we had a guy named Steve McCabe, who was from Fort Wayne, about a 6'8" redheaded guy, and another guy named Joe Lefevre, who played at Elkhart, and they beat Kent Benson's team in the state championship in 71 or 72. I think it was 71 in the afternoon game. I think they got beat in the final game by East Chicago, Washington, but Elkhart Central, I believe it was. Anyway, those guys were sitting behind the dugout on the bench. And when I came over, they said, "We're not calling you Easy Ed anymore. We're going to call you Eating Ed, because you're eating those guys alive." So to this day, McCabe calls me Eating Ed.
Did you feel that the floor gave you a couple inches on your jump shot?
You mean the lift? Oh, you mean just the adrenaline there?
Yes.
No, I didn't. When I had the ball, that was all the adrenaline I needed. That was enough.
You know, and I'm assuming you had that, there was the, you know, the, what you call it, the ramps to get up the stairs too, which are a great memory there.
Yes. Yeah. And I've seen games there. I've gone to see a couple games over the years. My friend John Trimble, who's from Southwestern, is president of the Indianapolis Bar Association, a Hanover College grad, and he also played at the Citadel. We've gone to games there and watched the Butler play. They've had some great teams over the years. It's been a lot of fun.
Yes, they have. So take us back to Coach Ritter. I know it's like, you know, where do you start? What was your first introduction to Coach Ritter? Where do you start? What do you say about the man? What, you know, where do I stop you?
Well, first of all, Coach Ritter was one of those guys who was just bigger than life. And when he walked in the room, he just took over. And he was everybody's friend, and he had a great story, and he always made you laugh. But when you were engaged with Coach, he had the unique ability to single-mindedly and determinedly engage you one-on-one, that you felt like you were the only thing in his universe. Right. So he made you feel special, number one. Number two, because he'd had so much success, I met Coach Ritter and I was in the 8th grade, and he came down to the Madison Brown gym down on Broadway, down by Crystal Beach. And he started working with the 8th grade basketball team. He said, you boys are going to be the team that we're going to win the state championship with. So we're going to start working with you in the 8th grade. And he used a word I never heard before. And he said, we want to be great. We don't want to be mediocre. And I had to go home and ask my dad what mediocre meant, because I'd never heard that word before. But Bud instilled in us the idea that you can dream big. I've actually written an article several years ago for a basketball magazine in Indiana and about Bud, and I sort of encapsulated the things that we taught. Now, he never said these things in specific order, but as you exegete what happened, what you learned from him, number one, he taught us to dream big. Because our senior year, he says, boys, if we don't win the first game, we can't go undefeated. So we were talking about going undefeated and winning a state championship. That was our goal. We didn't do that, but we had a pretty good team. Number two was he would stack the deck in our favor, and in life stacked, and we would do that because he would scout these other players, and he knew everything they're going to do. I'll give you 2 examples. We played Billy Harmon my junior year when he was at Jennings County, and they had a guy named Bob Woods, Danny Brown, and Billy Harmon, 3 great players. Danny and Billy are both in the Indiana Hall of Fame and played at Louisville for Denny Crum. And we've been playing against them from the 7th grade up. And so we go into the state tournament game in the afternoon, or Friday night game, I guess. And they beat us in the regular season, and they averaged like 91 points a game at that team, because they were just really good. But Coach Ritter says, Ed, I've watched Billy play now for years, and every time he gets the ball, the first move he makes is a fake. So don't go for it. So just stand there and wait. And so sure enough, he drilled that into my brain. So all week long, don't go for the first fake. So Billy gets the ball and the first move is a fake. Well, he averaged 26 points a game, and we beat them 91-87. And there are a lot of people picked them to win the state championship that year. But he only got 13 points because I didn't go for his fake. Okay, so if you take away 13 points off his average, that's the margin of victory. So we were able to hang on and win. We had a big lead in the first half, but we hung on and won 91-87, I think it was. Second night, we played Jeff Fry, who was an Indiana All-Star of Jeffersonville my junior year. And they had a guy named Jeff Fry, Tony Winburn, who played at Evansville. Jeff went to Evansville as well. And Mark Inman came off the bench and killed us in the 4th quarter. But Jeff would catch the ball. He was like 6'6", about 240 pounds. He was a massive guy. And I'm guarding him, and he's their center. But Bud said, Ed, every time he catches the ball, he throws it over his left shoulder, and then he spins around to his right to shoot a jumper. And he said, so every time he goes that way, it's a fake. So just wait for him to come. And so when he does, have your hand up here. Well, he averaged 18 points a game, and I held him to 3 points that night, because I knew what he was going to do before he did it, right? So Bud would give us opportunities by being well prepared and well scouted. We knew what they were going to do before they did it. But the best story, though, is Julius Norman at New Albany, who played for Kirby Overman down there, and they won a state championship my senior year. Julius had a 40-inch vertical leap, and you weren't allowed to dunk back then. And my junior year, Coach Ritter says, Ed, He's going to catch the ball down here on the block. He's going to lean to the middle. Then he's going to drop step baseline, and he's going to drop it in the basket. He said, now, whatever you do, don't go for that fake, because he never goes that way. He always leans, he fakes that way, then drop steps baseline. He goes, you got it? I said, yeah. I go, I'm going to show you again. He goes, I'm going to fake left, drop step, put it in the hole. So he does this like 3 times. And I said, you got it? I said, I got it. Well, we're playing the game. He gets the ball down there on the block, and he goes, and I think he's not faking. He's going to the middle. So I slide over, he drops steps. I see his ankles go by at like 40 inches off the ground, right? And Julius drops the ball in the net. And I made the mistake of going back down the court in front of where Coach Ritter was standing. And he gets up and he goes, what did I tell you? I said, Coach, he sold it a lot better than you did. But he didn't do it to me again. I didn't let him do that anymore. But I saw he's not faking. He's going to the center. Bam. Then he drop steps. So those are the kind of things Bud taught us. But number 2, the third thing then was we always had a backup plan. And Bud and Coach Laurel were the great adjustments at halftime. If what we were doing wasn't working, we'd make an adjustment and we would be able to get back in the game. Or a lot of times we'd go in at halftime and make an adjustment, come out and run on, get on a run and pick up 4, 5, 6, 10 baskets, or 4 or 5 baskets in a row. We're up 10, up 12, and the game's over, because we would make adjustments and come out and do that really, really well. And then the last thing, though, the fourth thing is, and this one's really the most poignant. Bud taught us to never quit, never give up. And in life, there are times when you don't get to draw on lessons that are esoteric or complicated, but sometimes in life, the thing that you learn most is just don't give up, right? Just keep plugging. And I say that because a year ago, I lost my wife at 44 years. And sometimes I want to give up, right? But I don't, because I have people counting on me and my family counting on me, and my grandkids want to be around, I think, to watch me get old and senile, more senile. But I still draw upon those lessons, you know, in business and in life, and sometimes just day to day of just getting out of bed, don't give up. And so that's who Bud Ritter was. Even today, I'm 66 years old. I'm still living the principles that Bud Ritter taught me as a 15-year-old kid.
A lot of people don't get that. You have to be around someone who, you know, you have to be around someone like that for them to understand on a daily basis when you do think of Coach Ritter and why you keep going.
Yeah.
And now you said in the 8th grade, was he kind of the beginning or kind of like an architect of a feeder system?
Well, we had one junior high school in Indiana, and so it wasn't really a feeder system.
Okay.
But we did have a thing called Little League basketball that my father-in-law, Bob Wallace, started with Frank Rusk in the 1940s and in the 50s. And they played at the Armory and at the Brown Gym on Saturday mornings. And so in the 3rd grade, they had a C league, a B league, and an A league. So in the 3rd grade in Madison basketball on Saturday morning, where every kid in the school system is down there playing basketball at 9 o'clock in the morning, playing you came down there to play basketball. And I remember the first game we were playing, I scored 6 points my 3rd grade year. And the first game, I got the ball at the foul line and I shot it, and somehow it went in. And I'm feeling like, yeah, I got this. And I'm running back down the court, and somebody yells from the bleachers, "Slop!" Like, how did that go in? Well, I don't know. I just knew it went in. So I was addicted after that first shot went up and it went in. Oh, gosh.
And so Coach Ritter, was he just his wardrobe? I've seen pants. You were talking about a basketball. Some of this has been kind of like your basketball shorts. Some of these things that he've kind of innovated were made illegal.
Yes. There were several rules but Bud was an innovator, that rules got changed. My sophomore year, I was the tallest guy at 6'3", and Pat Dryden was 6'3", and Mike Modisette was like 6'2". We were the 3 centers, and none of us could jump, right? And so we would leave a guy, we'd leave a guy at the head of the circle alone, and the guy jumping center is trying to look around, pretend like he's not looking at the guy right there he's going to tip the ball to, because He's going to win the tip. Well, we rehearsed and choreographed and practiced 1, 2, like a ballet, 1, 2, 3, and jump in front of it. We'd steal the tap. And there was jump ball every quarter back then, right? So that's 4 possessions a night that we would get that we didn't get otherwise, right? Instead of whatever the number's 50-50 or whatever the number is going to be. So we rehearsed that, and they changed the rule that said once the ball goes up, you can't move on the circle. So they changed that rule. They also changed the design of the uniforms. They made it that you couldn't have anything other than piping or something, or maybe a letter down on the pants. So because we had silver dollar polka dots on our stuff, right? And so Bud there was another rule that we had, and we only did it during the state tournament, but there was no rule that said back then that if the guy that got fouled was the one that had to shoot the free throw. So during the state tournament, I was a 83% free throw shooter. And so if you got fouled, I might just walk to the foul line and shoot the free throw because there was no rule that said that. And then they finally figured out what was going on, and they changed that rule and said it's a technical foul if somebody now who's not the person fouled, goes to the foul line to shoot the free throw. So, but Bud would say, well, there's no rule against it, so we would do that. But we only did it during a regular tournament, during the state tournament time. So, it worked out pretty well. I don't recall ever missing a free throw when I did that as a player.
It's interesting. He just passed away a couple of weeks ago, but Jim Powers, who played for John Wooden at Indiana State Normal College, whatever they called it before he went to UCLA, and actually played for John Wooden when he was at South Bend Central. He pioneered this thing where he'd use a walkie-talkie up in the stands, and the assistant coach would tell him stuff down the bottom. And he's like, "This is working great." And then all of a sudden, it's like, "Oh no, that's illegal."
Yeah, right.
Back to Coach Ritter. There are some people you just want to satisfy, make happy, make them proud of you because you listen to what they said, and you really work off of that. Could he get angry? Were there different sides to Coach Ritter when he really wanted to get across to you? Were there things that he would do would be on individual basis? Did he have a temper? Did he get technical fouls? I mean, how did he handle a group of young men that are still maturing?
You can say it, young knuckleheads. Okay. One time there was a year, my junior year, the only time I didn't start. And he didn't put me in the starting lineup, and it's because I dogged it. I was upset with something in practice, didn't play very hard. So the starting lineup comes out, and I'm not in it. And I'm the leading scorer and leading rebounder, and I'm not starting against, I think it was Silver Creek or either Greensburg or Silver Creek. I forget who it was, but anyway, so in the warm up, I'm shooting hook shots from the head of the circle. I'm shooting left-hand jumpers from the corner. I'm just making a gigantic fool of myself, being a knucklehead. And I'm shooting free throws left-handed, because I'm not playing, and I'm upset because I didn't understand why I wasn't starting. But anyway, the game goes on, and like 3-4 minutes into the game, coach puts me in, and I just go bopping down the court, grab a rebound, throw it out. I think I threw it out of bounds, actually. Timeout. And I go bopping over, and he grabs my shoulders and slams me on the bench. And when Bud got mad, he got really red cheeks. I mean, fire engine red. And he's looking right in my face, just like I'm looking at your image right now. And he goes, "Young man, if you ever want to play basketball again, you best get your butt in gear. And I want to see you in my office at 8:00 Monday morning." And I went, "Yes, sir." And by the way, no more left-handed shots, no more bopping up and down the court. I was putting my head down. I knew he was a very happy guy, very jovial guy. But when he got angry at you, you knew that you crossed the line. And so he rarely did that. He didn't have to, because we all had so much respect for him and his knowledge of the game, and him being just Bud Ritter, the guy that was going to help us make all of our dreams come true and get a college scholarship. And and have a chance to have a good life, have a great life, actually. And so, yeah, he would get, and I know when he was younger, there were lots of times he was much tougher on those guys in the 50s and early 60s than he was in the 70s.
I picture Norman Dale slapping that, thing that he had folded in half, and then just kind of looking down at the bench, kind of like, and then coming in the locker room. How many times are we going to pass it? Yeah. 4.
We never had that problem. We never had a rule like that at Madison because we full court pressed and we fast breaked. And there are a lot of games we had 100 shots a night in a 32-minute game. Now think about that. That's 3 shots for us having the ball for 3 shots, not to mention whether shots the other team had. So we were just fast up and down the court. We were playing what UNLV called run and stun, full court fast break. We were doing that in the 70s with Bud. Fast break basketball. And we didn't have a 3-point shot. We shot them anyway, but we didn't have 3 points, but we shot it out there. But it was just fun, and people, I know I've talked about Jeffersonville, the coach down there, I think his name was George Marshall, if I remember correctly. He would tell his Jeffersonville players, they would have a Friday night game or Saturday. He'd make them come in and just start running because he said, boys, when you go to play Madison, you're going to run all night long and you're going to be tired. So he made them start doing extra conditioning the week before just to get ready to come to play us because we full court press, we trapped, we did zone press, man-to-man. And then, I think a lot of games people would have 30, 35 turnovers against us. And that's how we could get so many ball points because we'd steal the ball in transition and get layups on the putbacks and stuff. And it was just awesome basketball to play.
What was when you were playing, what was the atmosphere like at the games? How, you see kids wearing the headphones and their AirPods or whatever and getting pumped up for a game. Tell us what the crowd and what playing at home meant to you.
Well, there would be, first of all, it was standing room only, right? And we didn't have AirPods. We didn't have the internet. We didn't even have cassette tapes. We had 8-track tapes, right? So nobody had an 8-track player in their head. But when you came out on the court and the band was playing and the girls are cheering and the boys cheer block were cheering, there's 5,000 people in there. And, I still get goosebumps thinking about just coming out. And every night they'd have a hoop made up and a picture of a Cub on it. We'd run out through that hoop and the boys would be lined up, escort us onto the court. And we'd go out there and start our warm-up drill. And it was almost spiritual in the sense that to have the privilege of being able to play basketball in an environment like that was just a real blessing in every respect.
Now, did you ever flirt with anybody from in the crowd when you were like shooting free throws or playing the game?
Well, there was this beautiful redheaded girl named Carol Wallace, and she happened to be seated right underneath the basket in the front row center of this cheer block. And we were playing Southwestern my junior year on Thanksgiving Eve on a Wednesday night. And I was dating another lady whose name was Sue Watson at the time. And we were going to go to the dance afterwards. And I look and I get the ball and I look up at Carol and I winked at her. And then I shot my free throw and I missed it. And the girl sitting next to her was Julia Ritter, who was Bud Ritter's daughter, or Carol's best friend. And said, "Did he just wink at you?" And Carol said, "Yeah, he did. And he missed," right? Because she was a basketball fan. And so I said, "I can't wink anymore." So I didn't ever wink at her afterward, but I did marry that girl a few years later. So that wink at the foul line started a relationship that lasted the rest of my life.
As a young knucklehead, as you've coined for the past couple of times we've talked about, what was your thought process on you're getting ready to you're ready to graduate from high school? What did you want to do with your life? Who kind of had what did you end up doing? Who kind of had the biggest influence on what path you went down? This is like one of those 8-part questions that they gave the athletic director today at Indiana University after they fired Archie Miller. And where did you end up going to college, and expound from there?
Well, I wanted to go to Miami of Ohio, Daryl Hedrick was the coach, and Jerry Pearson was the other assistant coach. I think it was the name Pearson. And because Carol went there, and she's a year older than me, so I'd visited the campus many times, but they had me come up for an official visit. They scouted me 3 times, and I played really great the first time and okay the second time. And I got the worst game of my 2-year career against Connorsville that year. And they were scouting me. And so they came down to where they had 2 spots and 1 scholar. They had 3 people and 2 scholarships left. And they said, Ed, we're going to, if one of these 2 guys doesn't take the scholarship, you get it. It'll be yours. But both of those guys took it. So I ended up not going there. So a guy named Wayne Perry, who's the all-time winningest college football coach in the state of Indiana, grew up playing with us at Crystal Beach, went to DePaul, where he was an all-conference football player at DePaul University, and a great friend of mine even to this day. He was a grad assistant at DePaul and coaching JV basketball. We had a freshman team then, right? And so he came to me and said, hey, why don't you come here and play? We'll get you a scholarship. So I went to I went to DePaul and played for Elmer McCall for 1 year. And I think I averaged right at 20 points a game as a freshman on the freshman team, and got to play on the varsity a few games and had a lot of fun. And but then Carol was going to transfer to IU instead of Miami, so we could be closer together, because we got tired of being apart, 180 miles. And so she decided not to. And at the last minute, she decided to go to Hanover College. So my sophomore year, after driving back from IU, when she decided not to go there, we both decided we would transfer to Hanover College. So I played for 1 year at John Collier at Hanover College. And then I had always played fast break transition basketball and gets lots of shots off. And John Collier is a Hall of Fame coach and a wonderful coach, but he was very controlled, motion offense, backdoor cuts, old Cincinnati, new Cincinnati. He had very controlled, very scripted offense. And I, let's just say I took a few shots that he wasn't very happy about. But my favorite memory of playing for John Collier, we played at Wilmington. They had a guy named Fletcher Yates. He was like 6'8", 300 pounds, left-handed guy. And Fletcher would put the ball down and dribble in slow motion to the basket and go up and power up, and nobody could stop him. Well, coach puts me in the game, and I already knew I was going to take a charge. So I slid over. Fletcher lands on top of me, and I'm seeing stars. I'm going dark. I can't breathe. It feels like an apartment building's falling on top of me. And finally I said, get off of me. And I shove him off of me. And Coach Collier says, great job, Ed. Great job. I said, enjoy that, Coach, because it's never going to happen again. So last time I took a charge was on that guy. It felt like an apartment building fell on me. So, but then then after that year, we got married in 1975 in July. And so I didn't play basketball anymore after that. I just worked part-time, but I wanted to go to law school, to answer your question. And I had a great friend named Gary Kemper, who was a very successful trial lawyer in Madison, and actually was one of the top leading scorers at Hanover College and a great player in of his own right. But I just didn't quite have good enough grades to get into law school. And so then I going to work for Cummins Engine Company. Then I got in the investment career. So I've been selling investments to institutions the last 20 years or so. And I still work a little bit part-time. So I've sold investments for years, was an investment advisor, and spent the last 35 years of my life in the investment world.
What was Coach Ritter like with former players? Did a lot of former players come back? And like when you were playing high school, when you left and went to college, would you come back and go to the high school games and stay in touch with Coach? Now it's just it's supposed to be so easy with texting, email, or a cell phone. But it seems far more difficult now when, all the links that you would have to go when you were younger. But tell us about the relationship that you kept with former teammates and Coach Ritter and so on.
Well, Larry Humes would come in, and when Larry was there, Bud would stop everything. You get to talk to this legend. We all just stood there with our mouth open, like that's Larry Humes. And then Buster Briley would come in, and we'd stop and talk about, he'd have Buster say something to us. And Jack Waters came in one time, and he was coaching at Delta State. and had coached at Georgia Tech and Georgia State and Mercer. I think was a really successful college basketball career coach. And he came in and he talked to us, and you just saw, and these guys, a lot of them were around town. I mean, Pee Wee Lakeman was around town. Jack Taylor was around town. These guys were all sort of the continuity of the Madison basketball. And Spence Snyder, who I mentioned earlier, his son Dwight was on my team. Another guy on our team, a really good player, probably the best point guard I saw in high school, was Billy Johan. His dad was on that state championship team. So we had this continuity of a legacy of, there was an expectation that you were going to do well, right? And Bud was really open to that. And in fact, years later, when I would go down for Thanksgiving or something, he always would, I'd just call and he'd say, come in the side door. You got, be tickets right there for you. You don't have to stand in line or anything. Just come on in. And so we had that family atmosphere, and the great players and people that Bud were friends with Bud would come in, and he'd make sure that everybody got to meet those guys. So it was a great blessing for me to be able to say that I knew Buster Rowley, right? Or I knew Larry Humes. And it was just a tremendous thrill to be able to say those guys are friends of mine.
So, what do you think? I was trying how to phrase this question, and that came across this way. What makes you most aggravated about today's game? Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
So here's what I think the problem is now. I remember we used to do a thing called a foot fake and drive drill. We would fake left and drive in. We'd have to make sure you crossed over. You didn't drag your foot. What aggravates me the most now is they let you travel every time you get the ball. And then they let you palm the ball. You see a guy dribble the ball and he's cupping it and then picking it up and holding it and then putting it back down. And they can go from here to here and get away with all that stuff. And back then they called traveling. I think Lakeman would tell you that I had 10 baskets taken away from me in the state tournament game against Jeffersonville that went in, that they called traveling before I shot. And if I'm wrong, it was 6, but I'm pretty sure it was 10, because I had a triple double. I had 29 points, 22 rebounds, and 10 travels that night against Jeffersonville. We got beat. We had a chance to win. But if they called, and I hate it, the NBA is the same thing. They don't call anything. You get that Euro step and the 3-step and the 4-step. And so what really aggravates me now is they don't call the game right anymore. But the other thing that I notice is there's sort of a distinct bifurcation. You're either a dunker or a 3-point shooter, right? And kids practice their dunking, but they can't shoot a free throw. And Bud had a policy. You had to make 18 in a row at night before you could go home after practice. So you'd walk up there and shoot, and you couldn't go home till you made 18. Well, there's a lot of guys staying there late at night. Bud finally said, please just hit 5 in a row, but this is basketball. There's nobody guarding you, and it's pretty simple. But I just think the fundamentals get missed because it's now the AAU games. The kids aren't taught the fundamentals of back picks or screens or anything like that. They're just, let me get my dunks in and let me hit a couple threes. So that's I would say, well, first of all, the game's far more athletic now than they were then. When we played at the rim, slightly above the rim, 9 feet to 10 feet, 3 inches. Today they're playing 9 feet to 11, 12 feet. They're playing a foot higher than we were when we were playing. But so the kids are more athletic. And so when you're more athletic, you're going to dunk more. It's a lot of fun to dunk. I get that. But you got to have more than this. You got to have more than just athleticism. You got to have skilled players.
What was your favorite place to play besides the home gym? What was the most hated place that you played? Who had the best fans? Who had the worst fans?
Well, the easiest, the worst place to play was Columbus North High School. They had a boys cheer block. And I remember me telling you about Bobby Wilson. Bobby Wilson dove for a ball, went into the boys' cheer block, and when he came out all black and blue and welts, got punched and got kicked, got spit on and everything. So he came out and goes, don't go in there, boys. Don't go in there. If the ball's going over there, just let them have it. So the boys' cheer block, the guys at Columbus North, a guy named Bill Stearman was the coach there, was a legendary Hall of Fame. I'm pretty sure he's in the Hall of Fame in Indiana. If he's not, he should be. They had some great teams over the years, Bill Russell and Jerry Newsom and guys like that. And I used to play with Noose and Steve Wilmer at lunchtime when I worked for Cummins in the 70s. We'd play softball and basketball together. And those guys are great friends and great athletes. But Columbus North was like the worst place to play. My favorite place to play probably was Seymour High School in Indiana. That gym was brand new. And my sophomore year, we got beat in the afternoon game by Barron Hill was on that team. And I remember I'm a sophomore and I'm back on defense and it's one-on-one. Barron's against me. And I'm thinking, I'm going to sit down and get in my stance. And as I do that, he goes right past me. He was so fast. Boom, right? So we had that game there. And then that was the night that Jerry Hale and Kelvin Wright, I think was the guy's name, and Jerry Schellenberger scored 40 points in the fourth quarter, and Floyd Central beat Seymour. And Jerry played at Kentucky, and Schellenberger played at Wake Forest. And I don't remember where Keevan, I think it's Keevan or Kelvin. But anyway, that was the funnest game I ever saw. They were down. They scored 40 points, I think, in the fourth quarter to win that game. And it was awesome. And then my sophomore year, I actually had the scoring record in the state regional there for the Jennings County game. And then the Jeffersonville, I think I had 26 against Jennings County and 29 against Jeffersonville. And a guy named Bruce, some kid named Bruce from Scottsburg, beat me a few years. He broke that record a few years later. I can't remember his first name. Vince Bruce, maybe, but that record didn't last very long. But I had a lot of great games at Seymour, and it was fun playing up there. And those guys are good fans too. And Barney Scott was the head coach back then, and he was friends with Ed Orrell. They went to Hanover together. So, there's all this, you talk about degrees of separation, right? So let me talk about one of that. Steve Green's dad, Ray Green, grew up in Madison on Walnut Street, next door to my mom. And Coach Green, when Steve was a senior, we were playing him in the sectional. And I went up to the game to say to hi, Mr. Green, before the game. And I said, Mr. Green, you know who I am? He goes, yeah, you're Eddie Hackney. I said, yeah, well, do you know who I am? He goes, no, what? I said, my mom was Mona Johnson. And I said, see her right over there? And I pointed to her and he goes, oh my gosh, you're Mona's son? I said, yeah. He goes, I feel old all of a sudden, right? Because I think she was about 10 years younger than him. But they were next door neighbors on Walnut Street in Madison, Indiana. Well, over the years, I became really good friends with RT, and I played against Steve. And I don't know him very well, but I've met him a couple of times at Hall of Fame functions over the years. And his mom was from over in Kentucky and lived next door to my aunt and uncle who owned a farm over there. They were next door neighbors to her family. And then my mother grew up next door to his dad, their dad there on Walnut Street in Madison. So we had this commonality of ancestry growing up in the little town of Madison, Indiana, on Walnut Street, which was a poor part of town, by the way. And I actually have a book I'm in the process of writing called Walnut Street, USA, about how families are poor and live on that little town. And then the next family does a little better economically. And then the third generation does a little better. My mom and dad were middle class. And then I got a chance to go to college because I played basketball. And then Steve Green got a chance to play pro basketball and go become a dentist. And RT became a trial lawyer. And, the progression, economic progression that happens over time in America, that gets played out every city around the country, right? So that's the title of the book I'm working on, called Walnut Street, USA.
And Coach Ritter was great at a lot of things. How come Steve Green played at Silver Creek?
Well, because Ray was a coach. His dad was a coach. So Bud wasn't going to give up his job for that. But they were a tremendous basketball. Steve Green and our team, there was a guy, I think his name was Roger Green. There were three Green guys on that team. The other Green wasn't related, but here's Steve at 6'8" and RT is 6'7", and they're a really good high school team. They were fun to watch.
How did you feel when Coach passed?
Well, you got to understand something. I lived in San Diego at the time, and his oldest son, Dwight Ritter, lives in Coronado. Dwight's a very successful trial lawyer and a dear friend of mine. He just became Uncle Dwight to my kids in the process of living out there for 7 or 8 years. And when Coach used to come out to visit Dwight, so we'd hang out all the time, and he'd tell stories about stuff and make stuff up, I think. But we had a great time, and I love Coach. And then when he died, I was going to go to Washington, D.C. on a sales trip anyway, and I rerouted my trip so I could spend that time there to honor him. Of course, Coach died from complications from Alzheimer's, and is just, a guy that, I will tell you this: I've met billionaires, I've met senators, I've met governors, I've met college presidents, I've met CEOs, I know entrepreneurs, I know really talented, really wealthy, really successful people. But what it all comes down to is everybody that I meet in my life, I calibrate against the people I met growing up. How does this guy stack up against Ed Orrell? How does this guy measure up against Tom Chilton? How does this guy measure up against Bob Crane? How does this guy measure up against Jack Taylor? How does this guy measure up against Gary Van Wy? How does this guy measure up against Bud Ritter? How does this guy measure up against Howard Hensler? And so these men that were influential, Mike Smith, K.R. Smith, how these men that were so influential in my life as a child, and my stepdad, Ray Alec, I got to throw him in there. But when you're a boy and you meet these men and you get a chance to see how impressive they are, and as I grow to become an adult, I met lots of successful people. And I baseline all these guys I meet now against the people I knew growing up. And I can tell you unequivocally, I have not met anybody that matches up to Bud Ritter. Because Bud Ritter took a kid from 4th Street in Madison, Indiana, whose family had nothing, and gave me an opportunity to have a chance to play basketball, to get a college scholarship. And I had big dreams, and I believed in a big God, and I got to go to college, and I got to play basketball, and I got to work, and I got to meet a lot of wonderful people, and I've had the greatest life. I could die tomorrow, and I'm a happy person. I've been blessed way beyond compare. And so the privilege I had of being a mentor of Bud Ritter and a friend to his family, his whole family's, they're all my family and his family. His daughter Julia was maid of honor at our wedding. So Bud and Mrs. Ritter came to my wedding, right? And we used to go to his house and hang out all the time. First house I ever saw that had central air conditioning was Bud Ritter's house. So, I knew Bud was different. I didn't understand till I was at his house one time. Oh, central air, Coach Ritter, first guy I ever saw have that. So just bigger than life guy, very accomplished, very entrepreneurial. He had his own plane. He would fly his plane to towns around the state to get film of teams that he could watch, study teams play. He would just go up there and he'd fly up his plane, get the thing, and fly back and watch the game. So we'd be prepared when we started. He'd have a scouting report for us telling us what they're going to do. So him and Ed Orrell had a huge influence on my life. And a guy named Tom Chilton, who was an All-American at East Tennessee State, taught me how to shoot the proper technique for shooting a basketball, right? And he was drafted by the Hawks and averaged 33 points a game, still holds all the scoring records at East Tennessee State down in Johnson City, Tennessee. And he's in the Hall of Fame. And he was a tremendous influence as well. And just, I read a book once by Tom Peters, and he basically said, you get to write your own legend. And I thought, what a great attitude to have. You get to write, this is America. You can be whatever you want to be. You can be whoever you want to be. You get to write your own legend. So why not? Why not?
What's the name of your book that you're working on again? What's it called?
Called Walnut Street, USA, The American Success Story.
Is that a working title, or is that what you're going to go with?
I think that's what I'm going to go with. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Ed Hackney, It was a pleasure, man. I think a lot of people are going to enjoy this. We appreciate your time. I know I probably went a little bit long on you, but we appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Billy.